Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here, doing something I very rarely do, which is post to my Facebook page. So a little different, but nevertheless, here we are. And the reason why I'm doing it is I'm going to do a little bit more of these recently. I've got my own YouTube channel, which reminds me, if anybody's watching, which very rarely happens, I just want to note that. So this is no big deal that no one will be watching. But if you happen to be watching, I would really appreciate you to subscribe and ring the bell, because that will let you know when I make more of these interesting posts. So join in if you can. But so today, though, I want to talk about one particular issue, and that's primarily the vaccine, and particularly Pfizer. I went down a few rabbit holes last night in relation to so I was asking myself, what sort of money people like Pfizer and Moderna and J&J and others making from the vaccine. You would think that this would be a magnificent opportunity for Big Pharma to make more money than they normally do in a crisis. Interestingly enough, Big Pharma normally make money when there are crises around psychotropic drugs, because, you know, when there are crises, people get depressed and anxious and whatever, and so they spend a lot of money churning out drugs that they make up, because they often make up the diseases anyway. And I'm not suggesting that in this case this is what they're doing, but I am going to suggest that they're certainly profiteering from it. So I came across this article, which I will now show you, that talks about Pfizer reaps hundreds of millions in profits from COVID vaccine. Now, we should not be surprised that Pfizer are doing this, but there are some things that really need to be noted. So when I went down this rabbit hole last night, I also discovered that the reason why the Omicron virus is now, or the Pfizer virus that they're now calling Omicron, has developed in the way that it has, is because the poor countries, namely African countries in this case, plenty of other poor countries around, but the African countries themselves have a very low take-up of vaccines. And the reason for that is that us richer countries have been hoarding all of them, and Pfizer, of course, were prepared to go to those countries who were prepared to pay immediately, such as the westernised countries in particular, and we absorbed all of the viruses, the vaccines that were available. So as a result, the poor countries got left on the side. Now, the end result has been that those particular countries where particularly their AIDS is relatively dominant, and where people's immune system has been damaged as a result of the AIDS virus, and where those people have not been able to receive even the appropriate medication for AIDS, those people are more susceptible to variants of the virus. So because the immune system is really low, blah, 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 it attaches to its receptors and it changes things quite quickly because it doesn't have any resistance to it. So that's basically what's happened in South Africa. Now, I'm not going to give you necessarily quotes from that place to go to, but if you just look it up on the internet, I'm sure you'll find plenty of people discussing this and arguing about it. Now, the interesting thing is that those countries have also got very low uptake on vaccinations. So in some of those countries there, 4, 5, 6% have taken up on vaccinations because they simply haven't got the supply, because us Western bastards have chosen to walk off with it all. So that's basically what has happened. And therefore that virus, because people travel to those countries, clearly then they move on back home to their own countries and whatever. And they, of course, bring the virus with them. We've also, here in Australia, had 3 cases, I think, of the Omicron virus over the last few days. But just coming back to this article, I just want to point out that vaccine. So the article is titled "Pfizer reaps hundreds of millions in profits from COVID vaccine." we should not be surprised. I am not surprised. But there are a couple of interesting little issues around this which we need to think about and we need to make a stand in some way against. Number one is we need to provide vaccines to countries that are in desperate need of it. So here in Australia, we're around 90% fully vaccinated at the moment. We'll be looking at booster shots. I'm sure we've got plenty of them online. But other countries, the poorer countries, don't. And they're the ones which will get these variations in the virus. So we need to, and so it's a whole world problem. It's not just a problem that sits within our own state or in our own country. We've got to be thinking much broader than this to help other communities to become vaccinated so that their populations don't die, where their health systems don't fall apart, because some of them are pretty poor anyway. And we need to be able to think more broadly, and we need to be able to think as communities rather than just as worldwide communities, rather than just individually. And I must confess, feel a little bit guilty about that myself, because I think for part of the time I've been thinking rather selfishly about myself and my family. Natural fact, we need to be thinking about things wider, because that's where all the viruses, the variations of this virus, the mutations from this virus are going to come. And we kind of got to wake up to ourselves, I guess. So, back to this article, which was in the New York Times. Last year, racing to develop a vaccine in record time, Pfizer made a big decision, this is interesting, unlike several rival manufacturers, which failed to forego profits on their shots during the COVID-19 pandemic. So, I don't know whether, I'm assuming that applies for Moderna and J&J and a few others, I guess, and Oxford and whoever they are. But Pfizer planned to profit. Well, let us not be surprised by this. Pfizer planned to profit on its vaccine. On Tuesday, the company just announced just how much money the shot is generating. The vaccine brought in $3.5 billion in revenue in the first 3 months. So that's only in the first 3 months. Now, nearly a quarter of its total revenue, Pfizer reported. The vaccine was far and away Pfizer's biggest source of revenue. We should not be surprised by that. And it goes on further to say, but the company's vaccine is disproportionately reaching the world's rich. This is the point I'm saying, right? So it's always lovely when someone like the New York Times agrees with you. I get pretty excited by that. An outcome, so far at least, at odds with its chief executive pledge to ensure that poor countries have the same access as the rest of the world to a vaccine that is highly effective at preventing COVID-19. So this is saying that they have produced an effective vaccine. I guess unless you're an anti-vaxxer, you're going to disagree with that. But nevertheless, they believe they haven't, so does 95% of the rest of the world. So they've produced this really effective vaccine, but they're not giving it to the countries that need it the most. But they do go on to say, I think this is interesting, but they might do this because suddenly they're exposed a little bit, So Pfizer has said it is committed to making its vaccine accessible globally. It announced on Tuesday, so the bloody thing's been with us for a heck of a long time. And they announced on Tuesday that it has shipped 430 million doses to 91 countries or territories on Tuesday. So I think this was last week. So isn't that thoughtful? Pfizer spokeswoman would not say how many of those doses have gone to poor countries and how many of those doses have they donated. They said is not profiting on vaccine sales. Right. But I did see a report somewhere that said that that Pfizer had in fact paid most of the profits. Remember that $3.5 billion? Well, most of those profits went to shareholders and executives. So there are people wringing their hands, driving around in their Lamborghinis, living in their posh houses, enjoying and grifting on a pandemic. And the rest of the world is suffering as a result. And we need to hold them to account. I wish there was an alternative. So we could say, nah, not buying that crap because they're not doing the right thing by the rest of the world. Let's choose B and C. But unfortunately, they have kind of, at this moment, they have a stranglehold. But my guess is that won't always be the case. there will be other organisations. So the other thing is intellectual property. So I saw this great video last night. A young bloke was interviewing a couple of people, and they're talking about intellectual property, and they were saying basically that there are very few countries who put a stamp on intellectual property and say, well, this product is so necessary to the community that we don't believe anymore that you should have intellectual property rights. In fact, let's abolish them and let's just make it open to everybody, which means other organisations and companies can take hold of that formula and start to make it themselves. And I think, why not? Why don't we just say, this product, which is the vaccine, is so important that we just stipulate, no, you're not going to make any profit from it, or if so, it'll be very low because other people need it, and mandate in a way the lack of profiteering that comes from this particular product. So the World Health Organization figures make clear that Pfizer has provided minimal help. There we go. So the World Health Organization figures make clear that Pfizer has provided minimal help to the world's poorest countries. Well, what can you say? Even though the company pledged to contribute 40 million doses to COVAX, a multilateral partnership aimed to supply vaccines to poor countries, that represents less than 2% of the 2.5 billion doses that Pfizer and its development partner BioNTech aim to produce this year. And don't you think that's pathetic? So since deliveries began in February, roughly 960,000 doses of Pfizer vaccine have been shipped to middle and low income, countries that have got millions of people. So, what else do they have to say that's interesting? United States, for example, is paying $19 for each Pfizer dose. Israel agreed to pay. So, this is interesting. I forgot that I read that. Pfizer has kept the profitability of its vaccine sales opaque, so no one can see it. The United States, for example, is paying $19.50 for each Pfizer dose. Israel agreed to pay Pfizer about $30 per dose, according to certain media reports, because they're not releasing the information. So they're not even consistent with regard to the pricing of their product. So whoever's prepared to pay, so this is the problem, I guess. Whoever's prepared to pay the most amount of money for their product gets the product. So those countries that are poor countries that just don't have that availability of that sort of cash, or some of these countries are run by bloody dictators who don't give a crap about the people in their own country anyway, and are reaping that money, all the money within their own country to themselves, are not prepared to invest. But primarily it is because we, as the rest of the world, isn't holding people like Pfizer to account, and governments could be doing something about it. We could be legislating that intellectual property is removed, that other people find ways to be able to make the same product, and that it gets distributed right around. Here in Australia, with Moderna, I think we're producing it here. Are we distributing it into overseas? Who knows? But I can guarantee you that if we do, we're not doing it because we're kind-hearted. We're doing it because it's an opportunity for a government to make some money. But we need to be a little bit more broader than all of that, and we need to be able to help these countries to be able to become vaccinated so that they're not exporting other variants to the rest of us. So just my thoughts. Hope you were okay with all of that, and just take care. Look after yourselves, everybody, and more importantly, when you're out and about, can you just try and work out? Yep, try and be a little bit safe. Okay, take care. See you, everybody.